Well, we're now ready to start on lesson 4, and there's a lot to cover this lesson. Be sure to read the pattern very, very carefully because how you cut the pieces is of utmost importance. The first thing you're going to be doing is cutting the pieces for template J and for template I. And because this fabric is directional, all 4 edges of this diamond are going to be biased. So that you'll see the arrow line goes across the middle of the diamond, and that's the straighter cross grain of the fabric. Template J is that really long template with 3 different splices in it, but it works really well for cutting the piece out. So just follow the pattern directions for cutting those pieces. The next thing we do for this lesson is to cut all those fabric 6 pieces. That is quite an undertaking, and it's really important how you mark them and how you cut them. There's excellent instructions on the 3rd page of this lesson. You should read it over extremely carefully and follow all the instructions as you cut the pieces out and line them up. But let me just go over a couple of things too. This is the mini stripe, and you can see in the quilt, it was what I designed the quilt around, to make use of that mini stripe. It's used throughout, and the fabric is used very efficiently. You'll notice there are sets. We work in sets of 2 stripes per set, and you'll notice that there's a seam allowance. The black is the seam allowance area, but normally that seam allowance area would tend to be a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch for either side, but it's slightly wider than that. So what you'll want to do, I think the easiest way that I did it was to get the long ruler and use the rotary cutter right up the middle, and you'll be able to tell where to line your ruler up to get exactly in the middle of these stripes. And so you cut them in pairs. So the strips that you cut are like this, with 2 stripes per strip. And you just cut as many stripes as the pattern tells you. Just follow those instructions exactly. We don't need to go over it in the video here. And then you're going to start cutting the pieces, and there's a lot of pieces to cut. You'll have these long pieces that you've cut that you'll be cutting all the individual pieces that you need from all these templates for that from fabric 6. Let me take just for example the C piece. So if you follow the directions, you'll see there's a mirror line on the template. Now that mirror line, it's hard to see, but these diamonds line up exactly opposite each other where they touch or where the middles of them are. And that's where that mirror line goes. You work with it on your fabric until you line up the design, and then you're in the mirror line. That mirror line on mine is going right down the middle of the diamond. And if you do that, you're automatically going to end at the same place on either end. And you need that for matching. When you go to match these corners later, when you sew up the whole quilt, this is where Elaine Kelly, who wrote the pattern instructions for my design, I think was masterful in figuring out how these all match and how they all come together, because it makes it happen so easily. She did a really great job. So follow those directions, but you'll see as I put this mirror line right at a mirror image of those diamonds, it's going to end at the same place on either side. So once you've lined it up once, you can just it'll tell you how many to cut from each piece, but I found you can actually conserve some space if instead of just taking the next one and going like this, you can turn it this way, and they almost actually line up right together. You can kind of share a common line. Now make sure, absolutely sure, don't flip it, otherwise you're going to be cutting them wrong. All you're doing is rotating it around and making use of that same angle, so you conserve fabric. You can actually almost do a shared line on there. So that happens with a lot of the templates, but don't ever flip any of them over unless you're told to in the instructions, because most of them just rotate around and turn. So just cut all those pieces. It spells out in there how you cut the pieces for all of these various templates and which ones have mirror lines. Now these are the ones where, like on this template A, there's this dot, and you want to be sure to mark those dots onto the piece when you cut it, and then you'll find you need those for lining up some of these odd places and when doing our partial seams later. So follow the directions, cut all the pieces you need. There should be plenty of your mini stripe with some left over in case you make a mistake. And we'll go on to the next step. The pattern tells you to cut 6 identical triangles from template B, and also to cut 6 identical pieces from template A. Now it's very important here as you lay that template on there, remember that dot. And you need to mark a dot. I've already marked it here, if you can see the dot. That dot is important because this triangle, and this is where we need to be sure where the straight of grain goes. This triangle is going to go here, and without having the dot, you don't really know where it's going to line up. So you need the dot on this piece, and you need the dot here. It's hard for you to see it on this rust-colored piece, but I've got the dots there, and I'm going to line them up right with those dots. My pin is going to come out right at the dot on both sides. I'm going to make absolute sure, not quite there. All right, my pin is right at the dot. It's right at the dot over here. And then whether you're doing it by hand or machine, I would just sew that seam. Now, make sure, this is the first time we're sewing anything with this mini stripe, so you don't want to sew from the triangle side. We want to sew from the mini stripe side because you have this nice convenient line to use as a guide. Now remember, when we cut the stripes apart, we said that space in between was a little bit wider than 1/2 inch, so you've got more than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So when you sew your line, you're going to come in just to the 1/4 inch, which means that on all these pieces, you're going to have this little narrow black part of the line as part of the design. So when you sew those together, and I have one of them here, you can see what I'm talking about. I've sewn, there's a little bit of the black showing on the other side of the mini stripe. That's because that area in between was a little bit more than 1/2 inch. So what you're going to be doing, pin very carefully, as I said, sew from the mini stripe side, just it looks like about 1/8 inch in along that line. And now you need to make 6 of these for the next lesson. And that's all we need to do for this part of it for today. Just do those 6, save them, and we'll come look at it again next month. This month, month 4, step 1, fabric 5, it instructs you to cut a certain size large rectangle. Those rectangles are then cut down for the corners, 2 one way and 2 reverse, which means you have to take care how to cut them. So I'm not working with huge big things. I'm just illustrating with a small rectangle piece of fabric that's more or less the size you want. I find it easiest and least apt to get confused if you cut your 2 rectangles and put wrong sides together. So you're automatically, when we go to cut the way the pattern tells you from corner to corner diagonally, we're automatically going to get 2 pieces that are one direction and 2 pieces that are the reverse. So here, these 2 are like this. These 2 are like this. So those are your corner pieces, and then those are bordered with a border print, well, with the mini stripe, fabric 6, are going to go on either side of that. And I will go through the steps that the pattern gives you for cutting those strips to the correct size. Here's one of the corner pieces that we cut from the accurate size rectangles, as I showed you in the last example. But now we need to have the border print that is cut from that. It has to be cut at exactly the right size. Now the pattern would give you instructions on that, but I thought just so as not to be confusing, I would go over it with you as well. So it has you take the template marked KKR and line it up on the left hand, that 36-inch strip that you cut. This is a 36-inch strip. You're supposed to line the left side of the KKR template. I'm matching these dots, and I'm just going to cut that. And then it has you go 33 and 3/8 inches. So now my ruler is only 24 from this cut angle. So you got this cut angle here. We're going to measure, I've got 24. I'm going to go down here, take another 10 inches, which is going to put me right here, but I need to take 5/8 of an inch off of that, so I'll have my 33 3/8. So I'm going to take 5/8 right here. You can do it, I'm doing it kind of quickly. You're going to want to do it super accurate. And then it has you bring that template, just slide that template down the strip until this sharp point hits this chalk mark. And then you will, I find the white chalk works really well on these dark fabrics here. Clover has 4 different colors of the chalk. I like one of each color depending on what I'm cutting. Once I've cut my piece, then I'm going to lay this down on another piece of the stripe, upside down, match the dots and the little diamonds and all, and cut another piece that's the reverse. And all together you're going to need 2 going one direction and 2 that are flipped going the other direction. And I've got 3 of them that I've already sewn here. Here's one corner here. Here's another corner. That is the opposite. And then this one is the same as this one. So I need 2 for the top, one and one reverse for the top, and one reverse for the bottom. So now as I'm ready to sew this, I wanted to show you how it's really important again to have the dots marked exactly where you need to stop and start your sewing, because this is a really sharp angle and it can get confusing. So I'm going to line up the dots exactly. It's hard to see the dots on this dark fabric. And then you'll come down to the other end and you'll line up the dots on this end as well, and then pin all the way along there and sew the pieces, and you'll have your corner pieces ready for later. So we're slowly building the quilt up, getting some of the pieces done. You're going to be amazed at how quickly it's going to start all coming together next month.